The heavy glass doors of Grand Crest Bank swung open with a seamless, silent glide, admitting me into a world where the air was cooler, the light was sharper, and the smell of desperation didn't seem to exist. I stepped inside, the sudden drop in temperature making the sweat on my back turn cold. Bella, my 3-year-old daughter, was a dead weight against my shoulder, her small body limp in the deep, trusting sleep of a child who doesn't yet know the world is collapsing around her. I adjusted my grip, pulling her closer, shielding her from the imposing grandeur of the lobby. My shirt was wrinkled, a map of my exhaustion, and I could feel the hollows under my eyes, dark bruises from months of sleepless nights. Around me, men in tailored suits and women in sharp blazers moved with the effortless confidence of people who had never missed a meal, their shoes clicking rhythmically against the polished marble floors. I felt like a ghost haunting a palace, a stain on their pristine reality. I wasn't supposed to be here. A man like me, Lucas Wright, a former freight coordinator whose career had evaporated the moment his wife's diagnosis came in, didn't belong in a place where the chandeliers looked like they cost more than my entire life's earnings. But I had no choice. The worn bank card in my pocket felt heavy, like a stone dragging me down. Yet it was the only lifeline I had left. I reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing against the raised, scratched plastic. It was the only thing Grace had left behind before she died. The memory of that day was still a raw, gaping wound in my chest. It had been a Tuesday morning, the sunlight filtering through the blinds of the hospice room in a way that felt cruel in its brightness. The nurse had just left. I was sitting beside the bed, holding Grace's hand, which felt so fragile, like dry parchment. Her voice had been so faint I had to lean in, my ear hovering just inches from her lips to hear her. "Keep the card, Lucas," she had whispered, her fingers curling weakly around mine, a desperate strength in her dying grip. "Don't lose it. Promise me." "I promise," I had choked out, tears blurring my vision. I didn't ask why. There was no time for questions, only the terrible, suffocating reality of saying goodbye. It was a plain debit card, scratched and faded, embossed with the silver logo of Grand Crest Bank. I had never seen it before in our years of marriage. Confused, I had simply put it in my wallet and tried to forget about it, consumed by the tidal wave of grief and the mounting debts that followed her death like a shadow. But reality has a way of forcing your hand. 2 months later, I was standing in the cramped, dim kitchen of our apartment, staring at an eviction notice taped to the peeling paint of the door. The bold red letters were searing. 5 days' notice. The rent was 3 weeks overdue. The refrigerator was a tomb, holding nothing but a nearly empty carton of milk, 2 eggs, and half a loaf of stale bread. I had learned to skip lunch so Bella could have dinner, my stomach constantly gnawing at itself, a dull ache that I had grown used to. I had emptied my wallet onto the table the night before, counting the crumpled bills and loose change. A grocery receipt. A photo of Grace smiling in a time before the sickness took her. And that card. I looked at the card again as I stood in the bank's lobby, feeling the eyes of security guards and patrons sliding over me. I had no idea if there was anything on it. Grace had been sick for so long, drowning in medical expenses that insurance barely touched. We had nothing. There was no logical reason to believe she had saved money, but she had made me promise. She had been so insistent. So this morning, I had dressed Bella in the cleanest clothes she owned, brushing her hair with trembling hands, and we had taken the bus downtown. I watched the city grow taller and shinier through the dirty bus window, counting the stops, praying that maybe, just maybe, there was enough on this card to buy groceries. Enough to keep the lights on for another week. Enough to buy me time to figure out how to survive without her. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the shaking in my hands. "It's okay, Bella," I whispered into her hair, though she was still asleep. "Daddy's got you." I didn't believe it myself. I walked further into the lobby, navigating through the open space. A woman in a navy suit passed me without a glance, her phone pressed to her ear, discussing numbers that would take me a lifetime to earn. No one looked at Lucas Wright. No one looked at the sleeping child on his shoulder. We were invisible, debris in the current of high finance. I approached the main counter, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The fear was physical, a tightening in my throat that made it hard to swallow. What if the card was empty? What if the account was closed? What if they laughed at me? I clutched the card tighter, the edges digging into my palm. I had to know. I just wanted to see the balance. I just needed a miracle. however small. I stepped up to the counter, my reflection in the glass partition staring back at me, gaunt, terrified, and utterly alone. I was just a man trying to keep a promise to a ghost, hoping that the woman I loved hadn't left me completely defenseless in a world that was ready to crush us. I approached the main counter, where a young woman with dark hair and kind eyes glanced up from her computer. Her name tag read Hannah. For a second, her gaze lingered on the sleeping child against my chest, and her expression softened. A brief flicker of empathy that almost undid me. "Good morning," Hannah said warmly, her voice a stark contrast to the cold indifference of the lobby. "How can I help you?" I shifted Bella's weight on my shoulder, my muscles aching from the strain, and pulled the worn card from my pocket. I set it on the polished marble counter, my hand still trembling slightly. "I need to check the balance on this," I said, my voice barely rising above a whisper. "Please." Hannah picked up the card, her manicured nails clicking against the scratched plastic. She swiped it through the machine efficiently. She frowned, paused, and then swiped it again. The screen blinked, but didn't offer the usual beep of acceptance. "Hold on just a moment," Hannah said, her brow furrowing. She typed something into her keyboard, then tilted her head, her frown deepening into confusion. "This card is flagged for internal access only. I can't access the details here. I'll need to take you to the VIP services area." I blinked, the exhaustion making it hard to process her words. "VIP," I repeated blankly. "I think there's a mistake. I just need to know if there's any money on it. It's just a different system, sir. Follow me." She stood up and led me away from the main counter, guiding me toward a set of heavy, frosted glass doors. As we passed through, the ambient noise of the bank, the shuffling of feet, the murmur of tellers, vanished instantly. We stepped into a quieter, more oppressive section of the bank. The walls were lined with dark, rich wood, and the furniture looked like it cost more than everything I had ever owned combined. A few clients sat in plush leather chairs, speaking in hushed, authoritative tones to consultants in expensive suits. Hannah gestured toward a desk near the back. "Wait here. I'll get someone to help you." I sat down carefully on the edge of a leather chair, adjusting Bella so she could rest more comfortably. I felt the weight of eyes on me immediately. A man in a pinstripe suit glanced over, his eyes sweeping over my wrinkled shirt and scuffed shoes, then looked away with barely concealed disdain. I shrank inward, pulling Bella closer as if to protect her from their judgment. Then, the door to a private office opened, and a woman stepped out. She was younger than I expected, perhaps in her early 30s, with sharp features and hair pulled back into a severe, sleek ponytail. She wore a black blazer and heels that made her footsteps sound like a judge's gavel striking the floor. Her eyes swept over me, cold and assessing, taking in every detail of my poverty. There was no warmth in her gaze, only a professional annoyance. Hannah approached her and spoke quietly, handing over the card. The woman glanced at it, then at me, her lips curving into something that was not quite a smile. She walked over, her presence commanding the room. "I'm Eleanor Vance, Senior Account Manager. Hannah tells me you need help with this card." I nodded, my throat dry. "I just want to check the balance." Eleanor's eyebrow arched slightly, a gesture of mockery. "You don't know the balance." "No," I admitted, shame burning my cheeks. "My wife left it for me before she passed. I've never used it." Eleanor's expression remained neutral, but there was a faint trace of amusement in her eyes, the kind people wear when they think they are dealing with a fool. She gestured for me to follow her to her desk. I did, clutching Bella like a shield. Eleanor sat down and inserted the card into her terminal. "So," she said without looking up, her tone dripping with skepticism, "you've been carrying around a card for 2 months and never once thought to check what was on it, until now." "I didn't think there was anything on it," I said, my jaw tightening against her condescension. "Then why come in now?" "Because I'm out of options," I whispered. Eleanor glanced up at me, her eyes cool. "I see." She returned her attention to the screen. The system took longer than usual to load, the silence stretching out, thick and uncomfortable. I watched her face, expecting her to tell me the account was closed, or that there was $5 in it, just enough to buy a meal, but not enough to save us. Then the screen changed. Eleanor froze. Her fingers stopped moving over the keyboard. Her eyes widened just slightly, the professional mask slipping for the first time. The color drained from her face, leaving her pale. She leaned forward, staring at the monitor as if it had shown her a ghost. My heart began to pound, a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "What is it?" I asked, panic rising. "Is the card invalid?" Eleanor didn't answer. She blinked, then clicked through several tabs, her movements faster now, almost frantic. Hannah, who had lingered nearby, noticed the shift. "Miss Vance, is everything okay?" "Get Mr. Montgomery," Eleanor snapped, her voice strained and barely controlled. "Mr. Montgomery is in a meeting." Hannah hesitated. "Now," Eleanor ordered. Hannah hurried away. I leaned forward, terrified. "What's wrong? Is there a problem?" Eleanor finally looked at me. The condescension was gone, replaced by shock and something else. Fear. "Mr. Wright?" she said slowly, as if choosing each word carefully. "When was the last time you spoke to your wife about her finances?" "She never talked about money," I stammered. "We were barely scraping by." "I don't understand." Eleanor turned the monitor toward me. "Look." I stared at the screen. At first, the numbers didn't make sense. They were too large, arranged in a string that seemed impossible for a bank account. I blinked, trying to force my brain to process what I was seeing. $78,423,650. My breath caught in my throat. My vision blurred. I gripped the edge of the mahogany desk to steady myself, feeling like the floor had just dropped out from under me. "That can't be right," I whispered, the sound foreign to my own ears. "The system doesn't make mistakes like this," Eleanor said, her voice flat with disbelief. "There's no way," I shook my head, my mind spinning. "Sarah, Grace worked at a clinic. We had nothing. We couldn't even afford her treatment. This isn't possible." Around us, the VIP lounge had gone silent. The other clients had stopped their conversations, sensing the sudden shift in the room's atmosphere. They turned to watch, their disdain replaced by confusion. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, staring at me as if I were a stranger she was seeing for the first time. $78 million, she murmured, almost to herself. And he didn't even know. The number on the screen stared back at me, cold, uncompromising, and utterly impossible. $78,423,650. I read it again, slower this time, desperate for the digits to rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Something like $78, or even $700. But they didn't shift. The comma remained exactly where it was, mocking my poverty. Bella shifted against my shoulder, her warm breath ghosting against my neck, and I tightened my grip on her automatically, my body operating on instinct while my mind remained frozen in a white-hot state of shock. Across the desk, Eleanor Vance was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Suspicion, perhaps, or a profound disbelief that mirrored my own. She leaned forward slightly, her fingers laced together on the polished mahogany desk, her demeanor shifting from dismissive to interrogative. "Mr. Wright," Eleanor said carefully, her voice low but cutting through the silence of the room. "I need you to be very honest with me right now. Do you have any idea where this money came from?" I shook my head, the movement jerky and uncoordinated. My voice came out rough, like gravel grinding together. "Number. I told you." Grace never said anything about this. We didn't have money. We were drowning." Eleanor's eyes narrowed, scanning my face for a lie. "Your wife worked at a medical clinic. You were a freight coordinator. Neither of those jobs would generate this kind of wealth, certainly not in a dormant account." "I know that," I said, my frustration finally breaking through the paralysis. "I know it doesn't make sense, but I'm telling you the truth. I didn't even know this account existed until 20 minutes ago." Eleanor studied me for a long, agonizing moment, her jaw tight. Then she turned back to her computer and began typing rapidly, her manicured nails clacking against the keys like gunfire. Her eyes scanned the screen, darting from one section to another as she peeled back the layers of the account's history. Behind me, the other clients in the VIP lounge were no longer pretending not to watch. The air in the room felt heavy, charged with the electricity of a scandal unfolding in real time. I felt the weight of their stares, heavy and judgmental, drilling into my back. I had walked into this bank hoping for a few $100s to keep a roof over my daughter's head. And now I sat at the epicenter of a mystery I couldn't comprehend. "The account was opened 4 years ago," Eleanor said, her voice cutting through my spiraling thoughts. "The deposits started 6 months after that. They came in irregular intervals, but always from the same source, a private medical trust called the Baxter Family Foundation." I frowned, the name landing with a dull thud in my memory. "I've never heard of them." Eleanor's fingers kept moving, digging deeper. The foundation is a charitable trust established by the Baxter family in 2008. They fund medical research and provide significant compensation for rare bone marrow and organ donors. She looked up at me, her expression sharp, searching. Does that mean anything to you? My mind raced, tumbling backward through the years. Grace had been healthy 4 years ago, vibrant and full of life. It was before the sickness, before the hollow eyes and the hospital beds. I tried to remember if she had ever mentioned a procedure, a donation, anything that might explain this connection. No, I whispered. She never told me about any of this. Eleanor clicked through several more screens, and then she stopped. Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of genuine surprise breaking her professional mask. She sat back in her chair, staring at the screen for a moment before looking at me. The coldness in her eyes softened, replaced by a dawning realization that looked almost like pity. Your wife donated bone marrow, Eleanor said quietly. 4 years ago, the recipient was a child, the Baxter family's son. I felt the air leave my lungs. What? Victoria turned the monitor toward me again. The screen displayed a scanned document, old and slightly faded, but the signature at the bottom was unmistakable. Grace Wright. I recognized her handwriting immediately. The way she looped her G, the careful, deliberate way she crossed her T's. It was a piece of her, alive on the screen. She didn't want you to know, Eleanor explained, her voice softer now, lacking the earlier edge. According to these records, she requested full anonymity. The donation was processed through a third-party medical service, and the trust was set up to compensate her after the procedure. But she didn't take the money. She specified that the funds were to be held and invested until her death, at which point they would transfer fully to you. My hands started to shake violently. I sat Bella down carefully in the chair beside me, afraid I might drop. My vision blurred with hot tears, and I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to breathe through the sudden, crushing weight in my chest. Grace had done this. She had saved a child's life, and she had never said a word. She had walked around with a fortune in her name while we ate instant noodles and patched our clothes. Why wouldn't she tell me? I whispered. The question directed more at the ghost of my wife than at the woman across the desk. We struggled so much. She was dying. We could have used this for her treatment. Maybe she didn't want you to feel indebted, Eleanor suggested gently. Or maybe she knew the treatments wouldn't work, and she wanted to make sure you didn't spend every dime trying to save her, only to be left with nothing. I looked down at my hands. They were rough, callous from months of hauling boxes and scrubbing floors, doing whatever degrading work I could find just to keep Bella fed. Grace had watched me struggle. She had lain in that hospital bed, drowning in pain and medical bills, knowing the entire time that she was sitting on a fortune that could have saved us from poverty. But she had chosen not to touch it. She had chosen to suffer, to let me suffer, solely to ensure that when she was gone, Bella and I would never have to suffer again. It wasn't a secret kept out of malice. It was a sacrifice of unimaginable scale. She had traded her present comfort and perhaps even her own life extension for our future survival. I felt something twist in my chest, a mixture of grief, gratitude, and the blinding, searing anger that I couldn't name. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her why she hadn't trusted me to handle it, but she was gone, leaving me with $78 million and a silence I could never fill. The heavy silence of the room was broken by the return of Hannah, who held the door open for a man who seemed to occupy more space than his physical frame should allow. He was tall, in his 50s, with silver hair meticulously combed back and a charcoal suit that whispered of old money and quiet power. His name tag read Richard Montgomery, Senior Vice President. But he didn't need the tag to command respect. He approached the desk with a calm, deliberate stride, his expression curious but not unkind. "Miss Vance, what seems to be the issue?" he asked, his voice a deep baritone that vibrated through the tension in the room. Eleanor stood immediately, her posture stiffening. She gestured toward the screen. "Mr. Montgomery, we have a dormant account that has just been accessed. The balance is substantial, and the activity flags are unusual." Richard leaned over, his eyes scanning the monitor. He adjusted his glasses, his eyebrows lifting slightly as he read the numbers, then glanced at me, then back at the screen. "I see," he said slowly. He straightened and extended a hand toward me. "Mr. Wright, I'm Richard Montgomery. I understand this has been a surprising morning for you." I shook his hand weakly, my grip limp. "That's one word for it," I managed to say, my voice sounding hollow. Richard nodded and took the seat beside Eleanor, pulling the keyboard closer to himself. Before we proceed, I need to verify a few things. This account is legitimate, but given the circumstances and the amount, we need to ensure every protocol is followed to the letter. Miss Vance, pull up the trust documentation. Eleanor's fingers moved quickly, bringing up a new document dense with legal text. Richard leaned forward, reading silently for what felt like an eternity. I watched him, my stomach churning with a mixture of nausea and vertigo. After a long moment, Richard sat back, clasping his hands together. Everything appears to be in order, he announced, his tone final. The trust was established by the Baxter Family Foundation, and the beneficiary is listed as Grace Wright, with explicit instructions to transfer the full balance to Lucas Wright upon her death. The death certificate was filed 2 months ago, which automatically triggered the transfer protocol. My throat tightened, a lump forming that I couldn't swallow. So it's real. It's real, Richard confirmed gently. Eleanor, however, wasn't quite ready to let go. Mr. Montgomery, with all due respect, this is highly irregular. The account has been dormant for years, and now it suddenly activates with a balance of over $78 million. We should conduct a full internal audit before releasing. Miss Vance, Richard interrupted, holding up a hand. His voice was soft but had a steel edge to it. I understand your diligence, and I appreciate it, but this is not a fraudulent account. The Baxter Family Foundation is one of the most reputable charitable organizations in the country. If they establish this trust, it was done legally and with full transparency. We are not going to hold Mr. Wright's funds hostage due to our own surprise. Eleanor's jaw tightened, but she nodded, retreating into silence. Richard turned back to me, his expression softening into something paternal. Mr. Wright, I know this is overwhelming. You're welcome to take some time to process this. However, we do need to schedule a follow-up appointment to discuss your options for managing the account. I stared at him blankly. Options? Yes, Richard nodded, leaning in slightly. You'll need to decide how you want to handle the funds. We're talking about investment portfolios, trust funds for your daughter, estate planning, tax mitigation strategies. We have wealth management advisors who can help you navigate all of this. The words washed over me like a foreign language. Portfolios, mitigation, estate planning. I felt a wave of panic rise in my chest, hot and suffocated. I had come here looking for enough money to pay rent. I was a man who worried about the price of milk, not tax strategies. I didn't know how to be a millionaire. I didn't know how to be anything other than a grieving husband trying to keep his daughter fed. I don't know anything about investments, I said, my voice cracking, the panic seeping through. I just wanted to make sure Bella had food. I don't know how to do this. Richard's expression softened further. He looked at me, really looked at me, seeing the fraying edges of my sanity. I understand, and we will help you. But first, you need to take a breath. This money is yours. It's not going anywhere. I looked down at Bella. She was stirring now, her eyes fluttering open, confused by the strange surroundings. She looked up at me and whimpered, "Daddy, I'm hungry." My heart clenched. I know, sweetheart. I know. Richard smiled gently. Mr. Wright, there's a cafe on the first floor. Why don't you take your daughter and get something to eat? Get some coffee. Take an hour. Come back when you've had a moment to breathe, and we'll have the paperwork ready for you. I hesitated. I was terrified that if I walked away, the computer screen would go blank, the money would vanish, and I'd wake up back in my cold apartment with the eviction notice staring at me. But Bella was hungry, and I felt like I was vibrating apart. Okay, I said, standing up on shaky legs and lifting Bella onto my hip. I'll be back. Take your time, Richard nodded. We aren't going anywhere. The elevator ride down to the lobby was silent, save for the soft, rhythmic breathing of Bella against my neck. When the silver doors slid open, the noise of the main banking hall rushed in, a cacophony of ringing phones and low conversations. But it felt distant now, like static on a radio I wasn't tuned into. I navigated through the crowd, feeling detached from my own body, and found the cafe tucked in the corner. It was a sleek, modern space, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out onto the busy street, framing the indifferent city in glass. I counted the crumpled bills in my pocket, my entire net worth, and bought a blueberry muffin and a carton of milk for Bella and a black coffee for myself. It took almost everything I had left, leaving my wallet as empty as I felt inside. We sat at a small round table in the far corner. Bella ate slowly, her small fingers picking apart the muffin with deliberate concentration, oblivious to the storm raging in her father's heart. I watched her, my coffee untouched, my mind drifting back to those agonizing months in the hospital. I thought about Grace, lying in that sterile bed, her skin pale, her body failing her day by day. I had thought she was staring at the ceiling in despair, or perhaps fear of the end. But now, with the knowledge of the bank account, I realized she had been calculating. She had been thinking about this moment, about me, about Bella, about a future she would never see. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. She hadn't just been fighting for her life. She had been silently securing ours. The guilt washed over me, a bitter, rising tide. I had felt so helpless, so useless, while she had been silently saving us all along. Bella looked up, her face dusted with crumbs, her big eyes studying me. "Daddy, why are you sad?" she asked, her voice small and piercing in the quiet cafe. I forced a smile, though it felt brittle on my face. "I'm not sad, honey. I'm just thinking about Mommy." Bella's face brightened, her innocence shielding her from the grief that was eating me alive. "Mommy's in heaven." "Yeah," I choked out, fighting the lump in my throat. "She is." She reached out, patting my hand with her sticky fingers. "It's okay, Daddy." Mommy said, "You're really strong," she told me. My throat tightened so hard I couldn't breathe. I pulled Bella into my arms, burying my face in her hair. She smelled of milk and sugar, and that faint, floral scent that always reminded me of Grace. "I love you, Bella," I whispered, holding on to her like she was the only anchor in a storm. "I love you too, Daddy," she murmured into my chest. We stayed there until the coffee went cold, just holding each other while the world rushed by outside. When we finally returned to the VIP lounge, Hannah was waiting to escort us back through the frosted glass doors. Eleanor and Richard were seated at the desk, a formidable stack of documents spread out between them. The atmosphere was heavy, expectant. Richard stood up as we entered. "Mr. Wright, we've prepared the necessary paperwork. Once you sign the transfer of assets and the beneficiary designation, the account will be legally yours." I sat down slowly, Bella perched on my knee. I looked at the papers. Words like estate authorization and trust liquidation blurred together, meaningless shapes on a page. I couldn't breathe. The panic returned, sharper this time, piercing through the numbness. "I don't think I can do this," I said, my voice trembling. Richard frowned, concern etching his forehead. "What do you mean?" "I don't know how to be this person," I confessed, my hands shaking so hard I had to grip the armrests. "I don't know what to do with $78 million. I didn't earn this. Grace did. She's the one who went through the procedure. She's the one who saved that kid. I was just there." My voice broke, and I looked down, unable to meet their eyes. "I'm a freight coordinator. I'm nobody. I don't deserve this money." I heard the sharp click of heels against the floor, then silence. Eleanor had walked around the desk. To my surprise, she knelt down, lowering herself until she was eye level with me. The sharp professional armor she wore, the coldness, the judgment, was gone, replaced by something raw and undeniably human. "Mr. Wright," Eleanor said softly, forcing me to look at her. "Listen to me. Your wife didn't leave this money for you because you earned it like a paycheck. She didn't leave it as a reward for a job well done. She waited until I met her gaze. Her eyes were clear, earnest. She left it because she loved you. Because she wanted to make sure that you and your daughter would be okay after she was gone. That isn't something you have to deserve, Lucas. That's just love. It's a safety net she spent her life weaving for you." I stared at her, tears finally spilling over. "I miss her," I whispered. "I know," Eleanor said, her voice cracking slightly. "But you don't have to do this alone. Let us help you. Let us help you honor what she did." I looked at Bella, then back at Eleanor. The crushing weight of unworthiness began to lift, replaced by a quiet acceptance. Grace had fought for this. It was my turn to fight for the life she wanted us to have. I wiped my eyes and nodded. "Okay," I said. "Help me." Eleanor stood and returned to her seat across from me, her demeanor shifting instantly from emotional support back to efficient professionalism, though the cold edge was gone. She pulled a fresh notepad from her desk drawer and clicked a silver pen, her movements precise and controlled. Richard folded his hands on the desk, watching me with quiet patience, like a grandfather observing a storm finally pass. "First things first," Eleanor said, her voice steady and grounding. "We need to address your immediate needs. You mentioned an eviction notice earlier. I nodded. The memory of that red lettering still burned into my mind. I have 5 days left, I said, my voice raspy. Maybe less by now. The landlord isn't patient. How much is the outstanding balance? She asked, pen hovering over the paper. $3,200, I said. The number felt absurd to say out loud. In a room where $78 million sat on a computer screen like a dormant beast. It was such a small, pathetic amount in comparison. Yet it had been enough to nearly destroy my life. Eleanor didn't react to the sum. She simply wrote it down. We can wire that today. It will be cleared before you get home. What else? I looked down at Bella, who was now playing with the button on my frayed shirt, humming a soft, tuneless song to herself. I need to buy groceries, I listed, counting off on my fingers. Pay the electric bill. Maybe fix the heater before winter sets in. It rattles all night. Eleanor nodded, scribbling notes. We'll set up a checking account for your daily expenses immediately. I'd recommend starting with a transfer of $50,000. That should cover your immediate costs, get the repairs done, and give you significant breathing room while we sort out the rest of the trust structure. My head spun. $50,000, I repeated, stunned. I had never seen that much money in my checking account in my entire life. Even when Grace and I were both working, and she was talking about it like it was pocket change for a coffee run. The rest needs to be handled carefully. Richard interjected gently, leaning forward. $78 million is not something you just leave in a savings account, Luca. You need protection. We're talking about low-risk investments, bonds, index funds, real estate. We will set up a trust specifically for Bella's education and future, so no matter what happens, she is secure. The goal is stability, not gambling. Okay, I said, trying to absorb the barrage of information. Just tell me where to sign. For the next 2 hours, Victoria guided me through the mountain of paperwork. She explained every clause, every transfer, and every legal term, ensuring I understood exactly what I was agreeing to. Richard occasionally offered clarifications, his tone soothing and reassuring. Hannah brought us fresh coffee and a cup of apple juice for Bella, who had grown restless and was now happily coloring on the back of a blank form with a highlighter Eleanor had given her. By the time we finished, the afternoon sun had shifted, casting long golden shadows across the marble floor. My hand ached from signing my name so many times, but when Eleanor finally closed the thick folder and slid it aside, I felt a physical loosening in my chest. It's done, Eleanor announced. The account is officially yours. The wire for your rent has been sent, and your checking account is active. I stared at the folder, unable to speak. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, studying me thoughtfully. Mr. Wright, can I ask you something? Sure, I said, blinking away the fatigue. When you walked in here this morning, she asked quietly, her voice hesitant, what were you expecting? Realistically, I thought about it for a moment. Honestly, nothing. Maybe a few $100s if I was lucky. Just enough to survive. Enough to keep the wolves away for 1 more month. I looked down at Bella, who was showing Richard her drawing. I just wanted to survive. Eleanor nodded slowly. And now, I took a deep breath. Now, I think I have a chance to do more than just survive. Eleanor's expression shifted, and for the first time since I met her, she smiled. A genuine, warm expression that transformed her face. Good. She stood and extended her hand. If you need anything, Lucas, don't hesitate to call. We're here to help. I shook her hand, surprised by the firmness of her grip. Thank you. Eleanor held my gaze for a moment, and something unspoken passed between us. An acknowledgement of the rough start. I'm sorry, she said quietly. For earlier, I shouldn't have judged you based on your appearance. I see a lot of people, and I've gotten used to making assumptions. But that's not an excuse. Your wife gave you something extraordinary. Not just the money, but the love behind it. I shouldn't have dismissed that. It's okay, I said, and I meant it. I probably would have done the same thing. Take care of yourself, Mr. Wright, Richard said, standing to shake my hand as well. And take care of that little girl. I will. Hannah appeared at the doorway, holding a small, white envelope. She walked over and handed it to me with a beaming smile. This is your new debit card, and here's my business card in case you have any questions about the online banking. I took the envelope, my hand still trembling slightly, but this time from relief rather than fear. Thank you, Hannah. You've been really kind. Good luck, Lucas, she said warmly. I lifted Bella into my arms, and she wrapped her legs around my waist, her small arms circling my neck. I could feel her heartbeat against my chest, steady and strong, the only rhythm that mattered. I walked out of the office, past the leather chairs and the dark wood, feeling lighter than I had in years. I walked through the lobby of Grand Crest Bank, with Bella perched on my hip, the white envelope clutched tightly in my free hand. The marble floor still gleamed under the afternoon light, and the chandelier above still sparkled like something out of a dream. But the crushing sense of alienation I had felt just hours ago was gone. I didn't feel small anymore. I didn't feel out of place. I felt like a man who had been given a second chance at life. I pushed through the heavy glass doors and stepped out onto the sidewalk, the city air hitting my face with a crisp coolness that felt refreshing rather than biting. The city stretched out before me, tall, noisy, and indifferent, just as it always had been. But something fundamental had shifted. The weight that had been pressing down on my chest for months, the invisible anvil of poverty and fear, was gone. It was replaced by something lighter, something fluttering and fragile, but undeniably real. Hope. "Ready to go home, sweetheart?" I asked, adjusting Bella's weight. She nodded sleepily against my shoulder. "Can we get chicken nuggets?" I laughed, the sound surprising even myself. It had been so long since I had laughed without a bitter aftertaste. "Yeah, baby, we can get all the chicken nuggets you want." We walked to the bus stop and sat on the familiar scarred bench. When the bus arrived, hissing its brakes, I carried her on board and swiped my pass. I sat near the back, watching the city roll by through the grimy window. The buildings, the people, the traffic. It was all the same scenery I had looked at with despair this morning. But now, the lens had changed. For the first time in forever, I allowed myself to think about the future. I wasn't just calculating how to survive the next 24 hours. I was dreaming. I thought about finding a new apartment, one in a neighborhood where sirens didn't wail all night. A place with a yard, maybe, where Bella could run around in the grass. I thought about enrolling her in a good school, one with art classes and field trips, the kind of school Grace had always wanted for her. I thought about taking her to see the ocean or the mountains, places Grace had talked about visiting, but never got the chance to see. The bus rumbled on, carrying us away from the financial district and back toward our crumbling reality. But I felt like I was breathing pure oxygen. When we reached our stop, Bella had fallen asleep again. I carried her up the cracked sidewalk to our building. The paint was still peeling in gray flakes, and the stairs still creaked ominously under my boots. But as I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the apartment felt different. It was warmer, somehow. It wasn't just a place to hide from the world anymore. It was the starting line for the rest of our lives. The eviction notice was still taped to the door, a stark red reminder of the precipice we had been standing on. But it held no power over me now. Tomorrow, I would tear it down. Tomorrow, I would pay every cent I owed. Tomorrow, we would start over. I laid Bella down gently on the worn couch and pulled her favorite blanket over her. She curled up instantly, her face peaceful, her small hand tucked under her cheek. I stood there for a long time, just watching her breathe, feeling a swell of love and gratitude so intense it almost brought me to my knees. Then, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the old worn bank card. I turned it over in my hands, running my thumb across the scratched plastic surface. It looked like nothing. Just a piece of trash someone might discard without a second thought. But it was the key that had unlocked our freedom. I walked over to the small table by the window where I kept a framed photo of Grace. I opened the drawer and placed the card inside, right next to her picture. Her face smiled up at me from the photograph, frozen in a moment of happiness from a summer years ago, before the sickness, before the pain. I traced the line of her jaw on the glass. She had saved us. Even from beyond the grave, she had wrapped her arms around us and pulled us back from the edge. "I love you, Grace," I whispered into the quiet room, my voice thick with emotion. "I promise I won't let you down. I'm going to make you proud." I closed the drawer and turned back to Bella. Outside, the sun was dipping below the horizon, casting the city in shades of gold and violet. I sat down in the armchair beside my sleeping daughter and let the silence wash over me. The fear was gone. The hunger was gone. There was only the steady rhythm of Bella's breathing and the certainty that, for the first time in a long time, everything was going to be okay. We had survived the night, and now we were finally walking into the morning.